The flashing red and blue lights made my living room windows pulse like a bad nightclub. I stood barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, heart hammering, watching 3 patrol cars idle outside my house. Somewhere behind them, my 16-year-old son Dexter was standing on the lawn, clutching his laptop like it was a bomb. This wasn't the moment I realized our quiet little neighborhood had gone insane. That came later, but it was the first time I wondered if moving to Maplewood Estates had been the worst decision of my life. "Sir, step outside." The deputy's voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice they use when they don't actually expect trouble, but they have to follow procedure. I opened the door, autumn air sharp in my lungs, and walked out into the surreal scene. My driveway glowed under the strobing lights. The neighbors were watching from behind their blinds, their silhouettes twitching like shadow puppets. And there was Brenda Thornfield, the HOA president, standing at the end of the sidewalk in her perfectly tailored blazer, arms folded, lips pursed like she'd just tasted sour milk. "She called you?" I asked the deputy, pointing in her direction. "She reported suspicious electronic activity. Cyberterrorism," he said without flinching. Dexter looked up at me with wide, furious eyes. "Dad, all I did was change the Wi-Fi password." That was the moment I wanted to laugh, scream, and throw something heavy all at once. Because I knew exactly how we'd gotten here. 3 years earlier, I convinced myself that a quiet street would fix everything. After the divorce, after the savings vanished, after working double shifts until my hands cramped from pulling wire and crawling through 120-degree attics, I thought a neat little house in a planned community would give us peace. Trimmed lawns, smiling neighbors, a place where my son could focus on building computers instead of watching his parents fight. The first time I met Brenda, she seemed harmless, a polite smile behind expensive sunglasses, a Lexus parked at a perfect 45-degree angle in her driveway. She complimented my herb garden. She told Dexter he was such a bright young man. She even baked us muffins. Well, I didn't know. Brenda liked control the way sharks like blood in the water. When she became HOA president, every interaction started to feel like a performance review you didn't ask for. Letters about grass height, notes about my work van in the driveway. And now, apparently, she'd escalated to calling the sheriff because my kid renamed our Wi-Fi network to something she didn't like. I kept my voice steady. "Deputy, this is a misunderstanding. My son's not a terrorist. He's a teenager with a sense of humor." The deputy sighed, already half convinced. But procedure is procedure. He asked Dexter a few polite questions, wrote something on his clipboard, and told us to expect a follow-up. By the time the cruisers rolled off into the night, Brenda was still standing there under the streetlight, staring at me like a queen inspecting a criminal peasant. Inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of exhaustion in my shoulders. "Dad," Dexter said quietly, "she's not going to stop, is she?" "No," I said. "People like Brenda never stop." The funny thing? At that moment, I still thought this was about a power-hungry neighbor with too much time on her hands. I didn't know she'd been watching us for months. I didn't know she'd built an empire out of intimidation and fraud. I didn't know that somewhere beneath our perfectly paved streets and vinyl-sided houses, tunnels were humming with stolen electricity and secrets that could get people killed. All I knew was that my son had just been treated like a criminal for making a Wi-Fi joke, and I was angry enough to fight back. If I'd understood what was really coming, I might have packed our bags that night. Instead, I poured a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table with Dexter, and promised him we weren't going to let anyone push us out of our own home. That promise would turn out to be the opening shot in a war we never meant to start. The next morning smelled like burnt toast and trouble. I found Dexter at the kitchen table surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and an empty cereal bowl. His laptop screen glowed with a map of our entire neighborhood. Every wireless signal labeled like a surgeon marking arteries. "You're building something?" I asked, pouring coffee. "I'm just documenting," he said, without looking up. "If she calls the cops again, I want proof this is harassment, not cyberterrorism." 16 years old, and already thinking like a man who expects to be attacked. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I ruffled his hair. "Dex, this is just a power trip. She's bluffing." He gave me a look. "Bullies don't bluff, Dad. They push until you push back." 2 days later, Brenda pushed. The certified letter came with a satisfying thunk on the porch, the kind of envelope that smells of toner and arrogance. Official HOA letterhead. Words like cease and desist and community standards of decency. All because Dexter had renamed our Wi-Fi again. Brenda drinks box wine alone. I laughed. Dexter didn't. It's not funny, he said. She's baiting you. And if you lose your temper, she wins. The kid was right. But my patience was thinning faster than old copper wire. I'd worked too hard for this house, sweating through 100-degree attics, crawling through basements that smelled like mildew and mouse droppings, to have some suburban tyrant threaten my home over internet jokes. That evening, the neighborhood HOA meeting was packed. Fluorescent lights hummed over cheap carpet, and the room smelled faintly of industrial cleaner. Brenda sat at the head table in a navy blazer sharp enough to cut glass, flanked by 3 board members who nodded on cue like dashboard bobbleheads. We face a clear and present danger to our community's digital security, she announced. Offensive network names undermine neighborhood harmony. We must act decisively. Someone actually clapped. I raised my hand. You call the cops on my kid for a Wi-Fi joke. You think that's decisive action? Brenda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Pellegrino, this isn't personal. This is about protecting our community. Her voice had that syrupy tone predators use when they're already planning their next move. By the end of the meeting, she'd rammed through a resolution giving the HOA power to monitor any wireless network in Maplewood Estates. Violate the rules? $100 fine per day. Providers could even be contacted to shut down problematic connections. I felt my jaw tighten. You can't just spy on people because you don't like their Wi-Fi names. Brenda leaned forward, still smiling. The sheriff's department agrees with me. Mr. Pellegrino, this is a public safety emergency. That was the first time I noticed the way her eyes flicked, not at me, but at the floor, as if she was picturing something under us. That night, I stayed up late, dissecting HOA bylaws with the focus I usually reserve for rewiring high-voltage panels. Emergency resolutions require real emergencies. Storms, fires, gas leaks, not bruised egos. I filed a challenge with the state attorney general before sunrise. Dexter had his own response. He renamed our Wi-Fi HOA Karen Detection Network and grinned like a kid who just invented fire. Within 48 hours, the whole neighborhood joined in. Networks popped up like digital graffiti. Brenda needs therapy. Survived Nazis can handle Karens. Even sweet old Mrs. Patterson got in on it, though she thought Wi-Fi was some kind of houseplant. Brenda didn't laugh. First came the noise complaints about Dexter's gaming setup at 2 p.m., then bogus citations about my work van, even a formal accusation that I was running an unlicensed electrical business because I help a neighbor fix an outlet. It was petty. It was relentless. But one night, everything changed. My security cameras, basic units I'd installed after the first round of harassment, caught Brenda behind my house at 11:17 p.m. She crouched by the electrical meter, flashlight in one hand, something like lockpicks in the other. The next morning, I knocked on her door with glossy 8x10 prints of the footage. She answered in a silk robe that probably cost more than my grocery budget. Routine HOA safety inspection, she said, voice calm as still water. At midnight? With lockpicks? I asked. The community deserves thorough protection. For the first time, her smile cracked. I told her copies were already with the sheriff and on Dexter's blog. For the briefest moment, her face went pale. Not angry, not smug, afraid. It was the first clue this wasn't about Wi-Fi at all. The harassment turned surgical, like someone studying where to cut deepest. A letter from a state electrical licensing board claimed I was under investigation for unlawful work practices. Henderson Construction, my steadiest client for 3 years, called to pause our contracts until I clear my name. And then Child Protective Services showed up at my door, clipboard in hand, asking why my son was involved in dangerous cyber activity. Dexter stood behind me, trying to look brave, but I saw his hands trembling. 16, and already learning what it feels like to have your character put on trial. This complaint's garbage. The caseworker finally admitted after touring our spotless home and seeing Dexter's organized computer lab. Someone's trying to weaponize the system against you. I didn't need a detective to guess who. But Brenda was making a mistake. She thought she could scare me into backing down. Instead, she lit something inside me. I thought the divorce had burned out. Fight? Dexter was fighting in his own way, too. His blog, a small site where he'd been documenting Brenda's abuses, started drawing attention. Comments poured in from across the country. People sharing their own HOA horror stories, offering advice, even lawyers volunteering to help. Within days, a legal defense fund that started at zero hit 20 grand. Then Jenny Vasquez showed up. I'd seen her on Channel 7, an investigative reporter with a reputation for tearing apart corrupt contractors and scam artists. She parked a news van in front of our house, like a tank rolling into enemy territory, and walked up the driveway, wearing heels sharp enough to kill a man. "Mr. Pellegrino," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've been hearing about your Wi-Fi war. I think your neighbor's harassment is bigger than a control freak with a clipboard." She spread property records across my kitchen table, lines of ink and highlighted notes that made my electrician's blood run cold. Brenda's been HOA president in 2 other neighborhoods. Both times, vulnerable families got driven out. Houses sold cheap. Then surprise, those houses ended up in her name, or shell companies tied to her bank accounts. I sat back, heart pounding. So it's a shakedown. Jenny nodded. A profitable one. But something's different here. The speed. The intensity. And this, she slid over an old city planning map. "Do you know what's under your neighborhood?" I shook my head. Prohibicionera Túnez. Forgotten for decades. Old smuggling routes running straight through these properties. A chill ran down my spine. I thought about the way Brenda's eyes had flicked to the ground at that meeting, like she knew exactly what was beneath us. That night, Dexter woke me at 2 a.m., his laptop glowing in the dark. "Dad, you need to see this." He'd been scanning thermal imaging data from the city's public infrastructure database. Nerd stuff I barely understood, but even I recognized the pattern. Heat signatures running under multiple homes. Electricity spikes where there shouldn't be any. "Somebody's drawing serious power down there," Dexter whispered. "Not just lights, industrial-level equipment." The pieces started clicking together like wires in a junction box. Brenda's obsession with our house. The lockpicks. The desperation. This wasn't just about pushing out homeowners for profit. It was about protecting something buried underground. "Dad," Dexter said quietly, "what if she's not working alone?" The idea landed heavy. 2 nights later, I got my answer. Security footage caught 2 men I'd never seen before slipping out of Brenda's garage at midnight. Not neighbors. Not board members. These guys moved like professionals. Dark clothes, no headlights, military precision. They disappeared behind the Kowalski's house and straight into the old storm drain access. When I showed the footage to Jenny, she didn't even blink. "Organized crime," she said. "Brenda's not the mastermind. She's middle management." My hands clenched so tight they ached. I thought I was fighting a petty tyrant with too much free time. Turns out we were standing on top of something worth killing for. Dexter looked at me, face pale but eyes fierce. "What do we do now?" I didn't have an answer. For the first time since this started, I wasn't sure I could protect him. By the following week, Brenda wasn't just harassing us. She was dismantling my life piece by piece. Henderson Construction officially dropped our contract. The licensing board opened an emergency review of my electrical credentials. Even the bank called, citing concerns about your risk profile, and threatened to call my small business loan early. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Somebody, Brenda, or whoever was behind her, was using every lever of power they could find to crush us. "Dad," Dexter said one night, staring at his laptop, "this isn't just about us. Look." His screen was filled with spreadsheets and maps. "She's been targeting anyone sitting on these tunnel junction points. Single parents, elderly couples, people who can't fight back. And every house that gets foreclosed, it ends up in her portfolio." I rubbed my temples, exhaustion pressing behind my eyes like a migraine. "She's not going to stop until she drives us out too." Dexter's voice cracked. "Then we don't give her the chance." He was 16, brilliant and fearless, but I could see how much this was costing him. He barely slept. The kid who used to laugh at his own bad jokes now moved like he was carrying a weight twice his size. And it killed me because I put us here. I brought him to this quiet neighborhood, thinking I was giving him stability. Late that night, someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps. When I opened it, Jenny Vasquez stood there, rain dripping off her coat, holding a manila folder. "Marcus," she said, voice low, "you need to see this. And you need to decide how far you're willing to go." Inside were photos. Brenda meeting with men who didn't look like suburban board members. Hard faces, expensive watches, the kind of people who don't wait in line anywhere. Jenny laid out property records, bank transfers, shell companies tied to offshore accounts. "This isn't just real estate fraud," she said. "It's organized crime. The tunnels aren't just smuggling routes. They're running power-hungry operations underground. Cryptocurrency servers. Maybe worse." "Worse how?" I asked. Jenny hesitated. "The FBI's been tracking synthetic opioid production linked to networks like this. If that equipment Dexter's mapped really is industrial scale, we're not talking about petty crime. We're talking about people willing to kill to keep it quiet." I looked at my son, pale, exhausted, but still glued to his laptop. "We need help." Jenny nodded. "I can bring federal investigators in. But if we do, you need to understand, this becomes bigger than an HOA war. You'll have to play along, make them believe they're winning, until we have enough evidence to take them down." It felt like being asked to hold a live wire with wet hands. 2 nights later, our doorbell rang at 11 p.m. This time it wasn't Jenny. It was Brenda, smiling like a neighbor dropping off cookies. "Marcus," she purred, stepping just inside the porch light. "We don't have to keep fighting. Sell me your house. Quietly. I'll pay cash, well above market value. You and your boy can be gone in a week." I swallowed the surge of rage rising in my throat. "Not for sale." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned cold. "Think about Dexter," she said softly. "Bright kid like that. Shame if he couldn't get into college because of a criminal record." I shut the door hard enough to rattle the glass. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the dark with the taste of copper in my mouth, the taste of anger and fear blending into something dangerous. When morning came, I made the call. "Agent Olivia?" Jenny's FBI contact answered on the second ring. "I'm in." "Good," she said. "But understand this. To catch them, you're going to have to look like you're breaking." So we started the act. I told neighbors I might be moving. Dexter stopped posting to his blog. I even let Brenda see me argue with the bank manager in the parking lot. All theater, while Agent Olivia wired our house, our truck, even Dexter's backpack. But deep down, I wasn't acting. The fear was real. The pressure was crushing. And every time I looked at my son, I wondered if I was leading him straight into danger. Because if Brenda and her people figured out what we were really doing, they wouldn't just ruin us. They'd erase us. The night everything came to a head, the air was too still, the kind of silence that feels staged. Dexter was hunched over his laptop in the living room, pale light washing his face. Agent Olivia's surveillance feed glowed on the second monitor. Heat maps of the old tunnel network, movement where no one should be at 2 in the morning. "Dad," Dexter whispered, not taking his eyes off the screen. "They're under our house again. A lot of them." Before I could answer, tires crunched on the driveway. Headlights swept across our curtains. Then a fist pounded on the door, hard enough to rattle the hinges. I eased Dexter behind me, every muscle tight. "Stay calm," I murmured, though my own pulse was a jackhammer in my chest. Through the peephole, Brenda. But not polished HOA Brenda. This Brenda was raw, hair frizzed, eyes wild, mouth set in something closer to fear than fury. 2 men stood behind her, not neighbors, not board members, faces hard as cinder block, jackets bulging where weapons could hide. I cracked the door 2 inches. "You lost, Brenda. Open it," she hissed. "Now." I didn't move. She leaned close, voice low but vibrating with panic. "It's over, Marcus. You don't understand what you're in the middle of. They're cleaning house tonight. If you don't sell, you disappear." Behind her, one of the men shifted, checking the street. The stillness broke, a faint buzz in my ear, Agent Olivia's voice through the wire hidden in my shirt. "We got eyes. Keep her talking. Teams moving in." But Brenda's desperation was boiling over. "This isn't me anymore," she said, breath quickening. "I'm not in control. You and your kid, your liabilities. They'll kill you." The word kill hit like cold water down my spine. Then the first explosion shook the ground. Not big, more like a muffled thunderclap under our feet. Dexter flinched. "Dad, that's coming from the tunnels." Brenda spun toward the sound. "Idiots," she muttered. "They're torching the servers." She looked back at me, and for the first time, her voice cracked. "You need to get out. Now." The street erupted in chaos. Dark SUVs screeched around the corner. Floodlights flared. FBI agents in tactical gear poured out, weapons raised. The two men with Brenda went for their waists, and the night lit up with shouted commands and red laser dots. "Down! Down now!" I yanked Dexter back just as gunfire ripped the air, sharp cracks, deafening in the quiet neighborhood. One of the men dropped instantly. The other bolted for the side yard, disappearing into the dark. Brenda froze, hands trembling, caught between surrender and suicide. Inside, Dexter was already moving, fingers flying across his keyboard. "Dad, they're flooding the tunnels," he shouted. "All the heat signatures are heading for the storm drains. They're trying to escape." The floor vibrated again. Another explosion, closer this time, rattling picture frames off the wall. Somewhere under Maplewood Estates, millions in stolen power and equipment were going up in smoke. I grabbed Dexter's shoulder. "We have to go now." We burst out the back door in a blinding light, and the acrid stench of diesel from the FBI's armored vehicles. Agents swarmed our yard, shouting over radios. In the chaos, Brenda made her move, darting toward the access hatch behind the Kowalski shed. "Brenda's heading underground," Dexter yelled. Agent Olivia sprinted past, barking orders. "Seal every exit. No one leaves that tunnel alive without cuffs." We chased her to the hatch, the cold night air tasting of metal and fear. Below, the tunnel glowed faintly with emergency lights, and water already creeping along the floor. Brenda splashed through it, screaming into a phone in some language I didn't understand. "Dad," Dexter said, voice tight, "if she opens those flood valves, everyone down there drowns." For a split second, I saw it all. My son, terrified but standing firm. Brenda, a woman who'd sold her soul so many times she couldn't tell fear from power anymore. The neighbors whose homes sat over this nightmare. "Stay here," I told Dexter. "Dad, stay here." I dropped into the tunnel, the stench of chemicals and wet concrete hitting me like a wall. Brenda was 20 yards ahead, fumbling with a valve wheel, water rising around her ankles. "Don't do it," I shouted. She spun, face twisted. "It's too late. You think the FBI will protect you? They can't stop what's coming." Her hands turned the wheel. I lunged, grabbing her arm. The struggle was brutal, primal. Her nails raked my face. Water sloshed higher. Somewhere behind us, agents were shouting, boots pounding metal ladders. Then strong arms yanked me back. Agent Olivia's team, as Brenda slipped, crashing into the rising water. They pulled me out while agents dove after her. The last thing I saw before they sealed the hatch was Brenda's face disappearing under black water, still screaming. The sun rose over Maplewood Estates as if nothing had happened. Soft light on vinyl siding, a faint smell of dew on trimmed lawns, but everything had changed. Brenda Thornfield was pulled from the tunnel alive, coughing up filthy water and screaming about conspiracies. Federal agents cuffed her wrists in front of cameras while neighbors watched from behind police tape. The woman who'd built her life on intimidation looked small, soaked, and terrified. The two men with her were dragged out too, faces blank, lips sealed. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. Dexter and I sat on the tailgate of my work truck while SWAT teams combed the neighborhood, sealing tunnel entrances, hauling out crates of equipment dripping with chemical residue. The air reeked of burnt circuits and wet concrete. "You okay, kid?" I asked. Dexter nodded, but his eyes told another story. 16 shouldn't look that tired. "Are we done?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said, though part of me wondered if you're ever really done after something like this. The days that followed blurred. Interviews with federal prosecutors, testimony about every fake citation, every midnight threat. Rosa Martinez, Brenda's housekeeper, came forward with trembling hands and a voice steadier than steel, describing how she'd been trapped in that mansion, forced to serve the men in the tunnels while Brenda threatened her with deportation. Her courage turned the investigation from local scandal to national headline. When the indictments came, the list of charges read like an encyclopedia of crime: racketeering, wire fraud, utility theft, narcotics trafficking, conspiracy, attempted murder. The FBI rolled up half a dozen people across 3 states. Brenda wasn't a mastermind after all, just a greedy middle manager willing to drown a neighborhood to save herself. The justice felt thorough, almost surgical, but it didn't erase the sleepless nights, the knot of fear every time I heard tires on gravel. 6 months later, Maplewood felt different. The tunnels were sealed in concrete. The old HOA board was gone, replaced by neighbors who actually wanted to make things better, not worse. Fees dropped to $50 a month. Meetings turned into potlucks. Kids rode their bikes without side-eyeing patrol cars. And in the middle of it all, Rosa walked freely down her street, head high, studying for a criminal justice degree on a full scholarship funded by seized assets. Watching her laugh at a block party while planting herbs in the community garden where Brenda's mansion once stood, that was real victory. Dexter got his own letter too, embossed MIT seal, full ride. He didn't brag, but I caught him smiling at it more than once. His college essay, How I Helped the FBI with a Wi-Fi Joke, went viral. Even federal agents started calling him for advice. I kept wiring houses, kept the same work truck, but every morning felt lighter. No more envelopes shoved under the door. No more cold sweats at midnight wondering how to protect my son from something I couldn't see. The night before Dexter left for Boston, we sat on the porch watching the sunset burn orange over the rooftops. The neighborhood smelled like fresh-cut grass and charcoal grills. Ordinary, finally. "Dad," Dexter said, tapping his phone to show me our home Wi-Fi name. "Still not afraid of Karens." I laughed, a real laugh this time. "You planning to start another war?" He shook his head. "Nah, just leaving a reminder. A reminder that ordinary people can stand up to power. That a single act of defiance, something as small as a Wi-Fi name, can expose the rot beneath a perfect lawn. That family isn't just who you love, it's who you fight beside when the world tries to break you." When Dexter left for the airport at dawn, the street was quiet except for birds waking up. I stood there alone for a long time, the gravel crunching under my boots, thinking about everything we'd lost and everything we'd saved. The Kowalskis waved from their porch. Rosa watered basil in the garden. Mrs. Patterson set out folding chairs for another meeting where neighbors actually smiled at each other. Maplewood wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was ours again. I locked the door, poured my coffee, and checked the Wi-Fi list one last time. Half the networks still had names like Karen Free Zone and HOA Watchdog. Not out of spite, out of solidarity. Sometimes the smallest sparks light the biggest fires. And sometimes, if you hold your ground long enough, the people who try to bury you end up digging their own tunnels.